There we go. Why do I have my Equinox of the Gods out at on St. Patrick's Day? It has nothing to do with St. Patrick's Day. But happy St. Patrick's Day, everyone, anyway. It's hardly a holiday to celebrate among pagans and New Agey folks and Thelemites and stuff, but it is a good excuse to wear green and to wear buttons that encourage people to kiss you. Now, my favorite, all-time favorite living human Irishman is Rodney Orpheus. I don't know if all of you are familiar with Rodney Orpheus. He's a fabulous musician, rock star, music producer, bon vivant, raconteur, wrote several good books about Thelema and Aleister Crowley and such. I was honored to write an introduction to at least, I think, one of them. Anyway, I posted one of his comments, I guess, on St. Patrick's Day right here on my Facebook page. So if you haven't read it earlier today, scroll down and read it. And so Rodney, if you're watching, happy St. Patrick's Day. And anyway, speaking of Ireland, I've never had a bad time in Ireland, and that's because of Rodney's hospitality. But anyway, happy St. Patrick's Day, everyone. I'm taking this opportunity. I'm watching somebody go by there. I'm taking this opportunity to sort of kick off the days and weeks that go into representing the Thelemic holy days, both formal and informal holy days. Now, it's almost, Thelema is not unique in observing this time of year as sacred, and leading up to Easter and Passover, and everybody seems to revere this time of year. It's spring, after all. I mean, what's not to worship in the rising of sap? Anyway, so the Book of the Law was written in April, early April 8th, 9th, and 10th. But prior to that, starting in February even, the events that go into making up the mythological passion play of the changing of the age, the equinox of the gods, takes place at this time of year, culminating with the writing of the Book of the Law on April 8th, 9th, and 10th, or whenever it was written. It was around that period, okay? It's officially celebrated as 8th, 9th, and 10th. And in the third chapter of that received, channeled text, the Book of the Law, it says, in the Book of the Law we find in the third chapter and the 39th to 41st verse an instruction to issue a book to say how this revelation was obtained, with certain details with regard to the style in which it is to be done. It has, this is Crowley's footnote here, it has hitherto been impossible to comply with this injunction, although an attempt was made in the Temple of Solomon the King, that's in the Equinox series. We now proceed to do so. The subject divides itself into 8 chapters. Now, don't worry, we're not going to read all eight chapters, but we're going to read enough to give you a good idea of what's contained in this, because not many people have the equinox of the gods. Okay. So I'm going to share with you what's called Genesis Libri Al. Genesis Libri Al. And it's almost like when Vyasu or Vyasa, whoever wrote the Bhagavad Gita, he couldn't actually read and write himself, so he had to dictate the entire Mahabharata, and it was such a monumental task that the only scribe that could take it down worthy enough was the god Ganesha himself. And so Ganesha picked up his pen and he started to, he stood by ready to take dictation. And Vyasa said, gee, I've got writer's block here. I can't, I don't know how to start. And Ganesha says something to the effect of, well, since this story is about you, meaning the entire universe, why not start with yourself? And that's what Crowley has done in Genesis Libri Al. Chapter 1, The Boyhood of Aleister Crowley. At 36 Clarendon Square, Leamington, Warwickshire, England, at 10:50 p.m. on the 12th day of October in the 1875th year of the Vulgar Era, was born the person whose history is to be recounted. His father was named Edward Crowley, his mother Emily Bertha, her maiden name being Bishop. Edward Crowley was an exclusive Plymouth Brethren, the most considered leader of that sect. This branch of the family of Crowley had been settled in England since Tudor times, but is Celtic in origin. Well, there's our St. Patrick's Day. Everything ties in, doesn't it? Crowley being the clan in Kerry and other counties in the southwest of Ireland, and the same stock as the Breton de Crevel, which gave a Duchess of Portsmouth to England. It is supposed that the English branch, the direct ancestry of Edward Alexander Crowley, came to England with the Duke of Richmond and took root at Bosworth. In 1881, he went to live at the Grange, Redhill, Surrey. In 1884, the boy, who had till then been educated by governesses and tutors, was sent to school at St. Leonard's, kept by some extreme evangelicals named Habershon. A year later, he was transferred to a school at Cambridge, kept by a Plymouth brother of the name of Champney. The dates in this paragraph are possibly inaccurate, he says parenthetically. Documentary evidence is at the present moment unavailable. Okay. On March 5th, 1887, Edward Crowley, his father, died. 2 years later, the boy was removed from the school. Those 2 years were years of unheard of torture. He has written details in the preface to The World's Tragedy. World's Tragedy was published by New Falcon Publications. I think you can get a copy pretty easily. This torture seriously undermined his health. For 2 years, he traveled mostly in Wales and Scotland with tutors. In 1890, he went for a short time to a school in Streatham, kept by a man named Yarrow, his mother having moved there in order to be near her brother, an extremely narrow evangelical named Tom Bond Bishop. Now, I have to digress for a second here. These people that he's talking about, his father, his mother, the brother, and everything else, this cult that they belonged to was considered extremely radical sect of Christianity. These are the people that invented the doctrines that now we consider conservative, born-again Christians. They were the ones that gave the script to this idea of the rapture and the idea of the hellfire and brimstone doctrines, and everything that we think of as the mass worldwide evangelical movement as we know it started right here. It's not 1,000 years old. It's not even 500 years old. It's a little over, it's not even 200 years old. And they say, give me that old-time religion. Well, that old-time religion was about 3 months old at this time. But I digress. This prepared him for Malvern, which he entered in the summer term of 1891. He only remained there a year, as his health was still very delicate. In the autumn, he entered for a turn at Tonbridge, but fell seriously ill and had to be removed. The year 1893 was spent with tutors, principally in Wales, the north of Scotland, and Eastbourne. In 1895, he completed his study in chemistry at King's College, London, and in October of that year entered Trinity College, Cambridge. Now, you got to keep in see how sick he was. He was ill. He was sickly. He was sick a lot for years at a time with asthma. And in those days, if you were that puny and that ill during so many years of your youth, you really didn't expect to live very long. The fact that Crowley grew to break mountain climbing records that still exist, and lived to the ripe old age of 72 was amazing. And when you hear rumors of people saying, well, he was such a drug addict, man, he died, you know, a blithering drug addict. No. It was a miracle that he stayed the level of good health that he did for so much of his life. But I digress. With this ends the first period of his life. It's only necessary to state briefly that his brain developed early. At 4 years old, he could read the Bible aloud, showing a marked predilection for the lists of long names, the only part of the Bible that has not been tampered with by theologians. He could also play chess very well, enough to beat the average amateur, and though constantly playing, never lost a game until 1895. He was 20 years old then. He was taught by a tailor who had been summoned to make clothes for his father and was treated as a guest on account of his being a fellow Plymouth brother. He beat his teacher uniformly after the first game. He must have been 6 or 7 years old at the time. He began to write poetry in 1886, if not earlier. See the Oracles. That was his early poem. After the death of his father, who was a man of strong common sense and never allowed his religion to interfere with natural affection, he was in the hands of people of an entirely contrary disposition. His mental attitude was soon concentrated in hatred of religion, which they taught, and his will concentrated in revolt against its oppressions. His main method of relief was mountaineering, which left him alone with nature, away from tyrants. The years from March 1887 until entering Trinity College, Cambridge in October of 1895 represented a continual struggle toward freedom. At Cambridge, he felt himself to be his own master, refused to attend chapel lectures or hall, and was wisely left alone to work out his own salvation by his teacher, the late Dr. A.W. Verrell. It must be stated that he possessed a natural intellectual ability to an altogether extraordinary degree. He had the faculty of memory, especially verbal memory, in astonishing perfection. As a boy, he could find almost any verse in the Bible after a few minutes' search. In 1900, that's when he was 25, in 1900, he was tested in the works of Shakespeare, Shelley, Swinburne, first series of poems and ballads, Browning, and the Moonstone. He was able to place exactly any phrase from any of these books, and in nearly every case to continue with the passage. He showed remarkable faculty in acquiring the elements of Latin, Greek, French, mathematics, and science. He learned Little Roscoe almost by heart on his own initiative. I confess I don't know what Little Roscoe is. But when in the lower fifth at Malvern, he came out 6th in the school in the annual Shakespeare examination, though he had given only 2 days to prepare for it. Once, when the mathematical master, wishing to devote an hour to cramming advanced pupils, told the class to work out a set of examples of quadratic equations, he retorted by asking at the end of 40 minutes what he should do next, and handed up the whole series of 63 equations correctly. He passed all of his examinations, both at school and university, with honors, though refusing uniformly to work for them. On the other hand, he could not be persuaded or constrained to apply himself to any subject which did not appeal to him. He showed intense repugnance to history, geography, and botany, among other things. He could never learn to write Greek or Latin verses. This is probably because the rules of scansion seemed arbitrary and formal. Again, it was impossible for him to take interest in anything from the moment that he had grasped the principles of how it was or might be done. This trait prevented him from putting the finishing touches on anything he attempted. For instance, he refused to present himself for a second part of his final examen for his BA degree simply because he knew himself thoroughly master of the subject. This characteristic extended to his physical pleasures. The mind boggles. He was abjectly incompetent at easy practice climbing on boulders because he knew he could do them. It seemed incredible to other men that this lazy duffer should be the most daring and dexterous cragsman of his generation. And he's not exaggerating there. He really isn't. As he proved himself whenever he tackled a precipice which had baffled every other climber in the world. And he's got a footnote here. In chess, he had also beaten many international masters, the ranks on the continent, and ranks on the continent as a minor master himself. But he cannot be relied upon to win against a second-rate player in a club match. Similarly, he had worked out theoretically the method of climbing a mountain. He was quite content to tell the secret to others and let them appropriate the glory. The first descent of the, and you'll have to excuse my pronunciation here, you guys, the first descent of the Dent du Géant from the Montanvers is a case in point. It mattered everything to him that something should be done, nothing that he should be the one to do it. This almost inhuman unselfishness was not incompatible with a consuming and insatiable personal ambition. The key to the puzzle is probably this. He wanted to be something that nobody else had ever been or could be. He lost interest in chess as soon as he had proved to himself at the age of 22 he was a master of the game, having beaten some of the strongest amateurs in England and even one or two professional masters. He turned from poetry to painting, more or less, when he had made it quite certain that he was the greatest poet of his time. Even in magic, having become the word of the aeon, the logos of the aeon, the word of the aeon, and thus had taken his place with the other 7 magi known to history, out of reach of all possible competition, he began to neglect the subject. He is only able to devote himself to it as he does, because he has eliminated all personal ideas from his work. It has become as automatic as respiration. We must also put on record his extraordinary powers in certain unusual spheres. He can remember the minutest details of a rock climb after years of absence. He can retrace his steps over any path once traversed in the widest weathy or the blackest night. He can divine the one possible passage through the most complex and dangerous icefall. As example, the Vibe Ceres. Oh, gee. It's in Mer de Glace. right center in 1899. He possesses a sense of, quote, a sense of direction independent of any known physical method of taking one's bearings. And this is effective in strange cities as on mountains or in deserts. He can smell the presence of water, of snow, and other supposedly scentless substances. His endurance is exceptional. He has been known to write for 67 consecutive hours. His Tannhäuser was written in 1900. He has walked over 100 miles in 2.5 days in the desert, as in the winter of 1910. He has frequently made expeditions lasting over 36 hours on mountains in the most adverse conditions. He holds the world's record for the greatest number of days spent on a glacier, 65 days on the Baltoro Glacier in 1902. If I'm not mistaken, that record still holds. It definitely holds at that elevation without oxygen. Also for that the greatest pace uphill over 16,000 feet, 4,000 feet in 1 hour, 23 minutes on the, I'll spell this, I believe this is in Mexico, Iztaccicihutl in 1900. That for the highest peak, first ascent by a solitary climber, the Nevado de Toluca in 1901, and numerous others. And if you can, any coffee table book of mountaineering that you can find to this day, Crowley figures prominently in a mountain climbing book. No mention made of his being Logos of the Aeon or a great magician or the wickedest man in the world or anything else. Just very complimentary recognition in mountaineering books. Yet he's utterly fagged out by the mere idea of walking a few hundred yards if it does not interest him and excite his imagination to take it. And it is only with the greatest effort that he can summon the energy to write a few lines if, instead of his wanting to do them, he merely knows that they must be done. This account has been deemed necessary to explain how it is that a man of such unimaginably commanding qualities as to have made him world famous in so many diverse spheres of action should have been so grotesquely unable to make use of his faculties or even of his achievements in any of the ordinary channels of human activity. To consolidate his personal preeminence or even to secure his position from a social or economic standpoint. That is the end of that chapter 1. Chapter 2 is called Adolescence, the birth of Frater Perdurabo. And we just may go on with that tomorrow. The culmination of this is the circumstances leading up to the supreme invocation of Horus on March 20th, 1904, and the reception of the Book of the Law April 8th, 9th, and 10th. So we're coming up on the holy days. So that's enough for today. Happy St. Patrick's Day. Drink something green. We will probably have our green magma or one of those green drinks that Constance whips up that sort of looks like pond scum. but it makes us very healthy. Anyway, until tomorrow, continue to be good to yourself. Be good to each other. Don't drink too much tonight. Or if you do, don't drive. The life you save may be your own. Do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law. Love is the law. Love under will.